is on our show quite a bit, talking about world affairs. He remains a paid analyst and consultant to a number of geopolitical, business, and security issue companies, also on terrorism and military affairs. He's got an incredible report out, which I assume, Craig, can people look at your report on your website, this position paper on what's going on in Syria?
I actually probably will post it on the website after we do this interview.
Okay.
I've actually got 4 or 5 of them out, over 500 pages. We've been on top of this pretty much for the last week when Putin launched in Syria.
He did a brilliant job doing what he did, didn't he?
Well, first of all, let me be very clear on something. I'm not a great fan of authoritarian regimes.
I understand that.
Even ones, it's nothing like the old Soviet Union. The communism isn't the same. Putin is not trying to extend Russia's borders the way a lot of radicals on the right are saying. But, I do understand that a lot of people, especially people who lived through the Soviet period, they're going to be very uncomfortable with what I'm about to say, but that probably will be because they don't understand that I don't believe the United States of America is any longer under the control of the United States of America's people. I think there's an oligarchy that has a different plan for America, and you and I are not part of that plan. So it's going to look a little bit like I'm saying America's the bad guy and Russia's the good guy, but it's not that black and white or that simple.
Okay, and let's make sure everybody understands that, folks. We're not knocking the United States. We're talking about policy.
I do what I do because I truly would like to see America restored and it taken out of the hands of that very oligarchy that we must admit now is in control of both parties. But in any case, Russia and Putin have been planning this for a very long time. I've been sitting here for a year watching our president and the administration and everybody surrounding him in the corporate world living in what I considered a kind of a fantasy. We're taking trips to Alaska with our friends and going shopping in Milan. And we're already campaigning like this is a serious election already when nothing is going on that even matters at this point. All the while, Putin spends every single minute of every single day, 16-hour work days, 8 days a week. The man is unstoppable. He's on a plane every minute. He meets with every country throughout the world, the leadership. He's built BRICS, which will challenge the IMF and the World Bank. But most importantly, he has been planning to go into Syria and resolve that crisis. He will do the same in the Ukraine. He will do the same in Iraq. He will do whatever he damn well pleases because the United States government, under the power of that oligarchy, has gone too far.
And they will not stop him, will they?
They will not stop him, no. They may fight him, but if they do, we will have a conventional World War III on our hands, which I'm not really all that sure the oligarchy cares one way or the other. They will win in any case. I mean, it's not a big surprise that in the same paper that I just sent you discussing Syria and the Ukraine, that there's an article placed in that paper that spells out that the largest banks in Wall Street have had the most profitable year ever is this past 2014, and they have $1.4 trillion offshore in tax havens not paying taxes.
And they're not lending the money out, correct?
They're doing quite well, aren't they?
They sure are.
So do they really care if we end up in a World War III with Russia? Well, no, I don't think they do. I think where the chips fall, they will win. And until the American people wake up, we will lose, no matter which way this thing falls. But I will tell you this. What little bit you're hearing in the American press about what's going on in Syria, I'm telling you, you're being lied to, you're being manipulated. If you're not listening to George Noory or Carl Nelson or Mills Crenshaw, you're not paying attention to the right people to be listening to in the media.
Is there
The matter is, this is not just a Putin enterprise.
No, not at all. Now, is there a possibility that there could be a nuclear war between Russia and the United States if everybody keeps pushing?
I don't believe Putin would ever launch even a tactical nuclear weapon if his troops were in trouble, which I doubt they will be. What Putin has done is actually, from a military standpoint, absolutely remarkable. I know that he's been planning it for a long time. I've been tracking him. I've watched him build the alliances. He just signed a military agreement with India, China, and Russia signed a three-party military agreement, and I think that was part of the reason, as I said on your show, that Obama made such a push to make a deal with Iran. But I also said it wouldn't work. Iran would side with Russia. Recall me saying this. Well, they did. They're sending troops to Syria to back up the Russians, ground troops. The Chinese are sending advisors. They've already parked an aircraft carrier group off the coast. China, India, Russia, and Iran are all taking a part in Syria in the face of America's blunder. And when I say blunder, I mean the American people, we have blundered in that we've allowed people to run our government that have a global corporate regime in mind, and they have no interest in what happens to us domestically.
I mean, look what we've done. We went into Afghanistan. That place, at this point, is a mess. We go into Iraq. It's a mess. Egypt is now a mess. Libya is a mess. And I think they wanted to do the same thing in Syria. Then they were headed for Iran.
Yeah, in fact, that is exactly what they intended to do in Syria, and it has a name. It's called the Wolfowitz Doctrine. It goes back to Bush Sr., not Bush Jr., Bush Sr. This was planned, thought out, and they actually believed they could pull it off. Back when Bush Sr. pulled the lever on it and said, New World Order, we're going to take out Saddam Hussein in Iraq, I knew that it was the beginning of something, not the end-all of anything. It was the beginning of a global regime that has no relationship to the United States of America. It's a corporate regime. And Syria, Libya, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan were all named as targets in a policy paper that was issued at the Bush Sr. White House in April of 1990. That's when it was launched. This isn't a joke. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It has a name. It's been published. I've talked about it for over almost 2 decades now. But frankly, what I don't believe the American people are going to hear about it all is what I just said.
That's true.
The Chinese are backing the Russians with a carrier group off the coast. The Iranians have sent ground troops, 150,000 Russian military personnel, Spetsnaz, volunteered to go in on the ground in Syria, and Putin said, absolutely, you guys go ahead and go in, and then he instituted a draft to draft 150,000 Russians to replace those that go into Syria. This man knows exactly what he's doing, and he is not going to back down.
Are they going after, Craig, the so-called ISIS groups that we're hearing so much about?
That is exactly what he's doing, and he's doing it in a way that is tactically brilliant. It is being done with ground troops. They're finding... First of all, you have to understand, when I was on your show a few months back, we discussed a memorandum that was released by WikiLeaks from the Defense Intelligence Agency. It outlined the U.S. participation with Israel of creating ISIS and creating safe havens for ISIS in Syria and Iraq so they could operate in overthrowing Assad of Syria and whoever was in control of Iraq at the time. This was planned by us, the United States.
Well, Craig, so we form ISIS, I think, to do our dirty work in the Middle East. We indirectly arm them by letting them take all the Iraqi weapons that we gave them. And I was going through a story last week. It's well over $600 million in military equipment that they have, rifles, tanks, Humvees, and everything else, which is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like that before.
Well, it's absurd. It's not just unbelievable. It's absurd. Everybody that spent one day in the military, I don't care if it's even National Guard, or if you bother to watch a few old war movies, you know that when you go in and you fight a war, that if you have to retreat, you destroy everything. You don't leave anything behind. We're leaving howitzer shells, Humvees, vehicles, guns, mortars, C4, bunkers,
in pristine condition.
Build IEDs.
Unbelievable. Well, I keep saying unbelievable, but you're right. It is absurd.
It's absurd because it's not by accident.
It can't be, because no military leader would say, hey, folks, just leave that stuff in pristine condition and run.
Now, we could roll in with 3 F-35 Growlers and destroy everything on the ground if we had to retreat.
Or, if we had to retreat, if the Iraqi army had to retreat, why didn't they just take all that stuff with them?
Well, they would have had to, if they'd been ordered to, but they were ordered to leave it behind for ISIS. a current government official, I'm not sure who it is yet, I haven't identified him because it's been a little difficult, but somebody has raised a couple of interesting questions. Where did ISIS get all the Toyota trucks?
That was a big story today, too. You're right.
Yes.
Where did they get it?
It was a big story the first time I ever saw a picture of ISIS, because I saw a group of men wearing black outfits with white tennis shoes like gangbangers from Los Angeles, driving brand new Toyota.
Waving up there in the back of the trucks.
Waving their black scary flag.
Yep.
I'm sorry. This was Wag the Dog. First of all, nobody in the desert wears black.
It's too hot out.
It's too hot. Nobody wears black outfits and then pristine, clean, white basketball shoes like gangbangers in Los Angeles. This was designed to scare the Christian American population. When they see them, it spooks them and they get scared. This whole thing has been an orchestration.
Now, is it out of control? Did it backfire?
I think what backfired is what I said in 1990 when Bush went into Persian Gulf 1. When he attacked Iraq, there was no reason to. There was no weapons of mass destruction. I don't recall doing your show back then, or if you had a show back then, but I went on the air with General Keegan, General William Westmoreland. We went on the shows together. We literally toured this country, and we did interviews together jointly with hosts all over the country. And we explained all of this to the public then, and I had a sidebar that Westmoreland didn't partake in, and that was that document I just mentioned that was issued in the April 1990 White House that was hosted by George Bush of the Trilateral Commission. And in that document, they state openly, now that the Soviet Union has fallen, we were going to go into the Middle East and we are going to take out the following countries in their full capability. Every area of capability: nuclear, chemical, biological, and importantly, conventional.
Yes. And there are only 2 left now.
Now there's only 2 left. And Wesley Clark has bothered to confirm this in interviews, that he went in right after 9/11 and said, we're going into Afghanistan. What are you doing? What are we doing here? And a general from the Joint Chiefs of Staff pulled Wesley Clark aside and said, you don't get it. We're going into 7 nations.
Yep, absolutely. So with this poker game, in comes a guy named Vladimir Putin, who's all in, and he's going to win the hand.
Well, as I said, the Americans, nobody has ever played chess very well against the Russians except Bobby Fischer,
That's right.
who is crazy.
He went over the edge.
He did go over the edge, but he was the only one that ever beat the Russians at chess, and we're not going to beat Putin at this one. Putin has been planning this. I've been talking about it. I've been warning about it. I'm going to get up at 4 o'clock this morning. In fact, when I get off this show, I'm going to be on another show. I'm going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to do Carl Nelson. And I'm going to do this until somebody tells me to shut up.
Well,
we have never been this close to a conventional World War III with a genuine nation state.
And as you say, China parked right out there, ready to pop in at any time.
Well, it was 3 months ago on your show. It was one of the first shows I did when Russia, Putin, China, and India signed their first ever military pact. And India, China, and Russia, of course, nuclear power. Why would they sign a pact without Iran? Well, Iran was then negotiating with Obama to come to some kind of an agreement over their nuclear capability. And, of course, Obama signed off on it. And I said on your show, go ahead, sign off on it. Iran will not obey the rules. Not obey it, they're sending ground troops to Syria.
Why did they want Bashar Assad out? He's not nearly as ruthless as his father was.
Okay, first of all, nobody we're talking about wants Assad out. This is a corporate oligarchy that runs the United States government. It's a Western corporate regime that wants all nationalistic leaders removed from power in all the regions that are rich in natural resources, raw materials, and this includes AFRICOM and North Africa. That's why Gaddafi of Libya was taken out.
But why a hands-off with Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, the Emirates?
Because they're our partners.
Aha.
The most ruthless, vicious, inhumane organizations on earth are the royal families of the Persian Gulf. But we made a deal with them under FDR that FDR would never have stood by when he saw this evolution. But, of course, he died, and we're stuck with the Saudis in our special relationship.
We've protected the families, haven't we?
Protect the families. We protected them after they perpetrated 9/11. We saw that all the Saudi family members got out of the country while they were shutting down airports for Americans.
I had Jesse Ventura on last night, Craig, and he echoes exactly what you say about the Saudis and 9/11.
They are the most ruthless, vicious regime in the Middle East. If anybody there should be regime change, it should be the Saudis. But that'll never happen because we're talking about oil companies, banks, and corporations that rely on fossil fuels, and the deal has already been cut with Saudi Arabia. Why do you think they're keeping oil prices at where they are? They can survive it, but they're going to try to put out of business all competitors, including domestic competitors of Exxon, Shell, Mexico, in Texas.
Those who are doing fracking are almost wiped out because of this.
That's precisely who one of the targets was. Domestic oil producers that could potentially compete with it's not a Seven Sisters anymore, it's Five Sisters.
Is this a brilliant plan on their behalf?
It's brilliant. Yes, it is brilliant. And they pulled it off to date. But in 1990, when George Bush Sr. went into Iraq, one of the first interviews I did opposing that move, and my God, did I suffer for it. The worst smear campaign of my life took place. For 2 years, I was smeared in The Nation, in every progressive newspaper, publication, all across the United States. But what I said was true. You will go only so far with this new regime you're trying to put into place, because once you get too close to Russia and China's borders, they're not afraid of us.
And why couldn't they pull in Putin as a partner?
Because Putin is a nationalistic leader that only cares about the Russian people. The same as Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, and Assad. I get it. I know they're tyrants. They're authoritarian. They're not Democrats like Obama, Clinton.
And they're not Boy Scouts. They're not Boy Scouts.
They're not Boy Scouts. But you know what? That's none of our business, is it?
You know, I was thinking of the mess in Iraq and what Saddam Hussein kept a lid on so much. And obviously, he was ruthless. He wasn't a Boy Scout. But he didn't bother the United States. I didn't like the actions of his sons because I think they were out of control. They were insane. But, you know, when the war was going on with Iran, we were the ones that helped the Iraqis. We kept pushing them. And I remember a picture of Donald Rumsfeld shaking hands with Saddam Hussein when they cut those deals.
And the same thing holds true with Assad of Syria. It holds true with Muammar Gaddafi. All of these, at one time or another, we have worked with. At other times, we are at war with. But when the Soviet Union fell, the global corporate regime, the Western global corporate monopolies, there were no Eastern monopolies because they were communist countries. So the Western monopolists, corporate monopolists, looked at the world and they said, without Russia, we could take Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan.
That's true.
Untold wealth in these countries.
So what went wrong? What did they miss?
They missed the one thing I said in 1990 you're wrong about. It might not be the old Soviet Union, but Putin ain't afraid of nobody, and neither is China. These countries are not afraid of us. Otherwise, why would 150,000 Russian troops volunteer to go into Syria and literally hunt down, like bounty hunters, members of ISIS and Al-Qaeda?
Would Putin have done this without China's backing?
Yes.
Okay, so he was all in.
I think he was without question all in, both in the Ukraine, the Black Sea, the Caspian region. He's had it. He's basically said, in fact, somebody just recently said, Lawrence Johnson, who retired from the CIA, recently gave an interview, and he said there's only one man on the planet acting like a grown-up right now, and that's Putin.
When does he start pushing back into Iraq and Afghanistan in other regions where we've been and have screwed up?
6 months ago. He's already made deals north of Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, to put 2 military bases in that region at their request. and he's in Syria at Assad's request. We're the only country going into these other countries without their request. We're going in to overthrow those regimes, and we're calling it regime change, and we're saying that it's legitimate and legal. Putin isn't doing that. Putin only goes in if he's asked to go in.
I spent 9 years in the Navy, Craig. I'm not a military guy. I never saw any action, anything like that at all. I was a public affairs officer. But when I saw pictures of the ISIS, as you did, in their trucks, waving, holding their flags in a long, miles-long caravan down Iraqi roads and streets. And I'm saying to myself, even if I were running the military as a commander, I would have bombed them. It would have been so easy, and yet we didn't touch them.
Well, look at the stupidity of that. If they were legitimate, if it was legitimate, and they're the enemy of America, and ISIS gets in their little vehicles, all dressed in black.
Annihilate them.
Snaking down 1,000 vehicles, all identical, by the way.
All in a column.
They bought a fleet. They got a fleet deal from Toyota, okay? And here we are. Think about it. With the satellite technology that we're all completely aware of now, thanks to Edward Snowden, you know what that would? It would look like a giant snake wiggling down the desert. I could have taken them out with water balloons.
Right. We could have had you at the controls of a drone with missiles.
Exactly.
And you would have
How hard would it have been? But see, they're not the enemy. We created them.
That's when I realized, when I saw that, it hit me. You way before this, but it hit me then that something was very, very wrong.
Yep, we had to create an enemy that was believable to the American people. It's not believable to the world. It's only needed to be believable to the American people. Why do you think for a solid year ISIS kept tweeting and using Facebook to scare Americans?
That's right,
First,
cutting off people's cutting off heads, stuff like that.
They were gonna kill, Christian leaders in America. They were gonna burn down public schools if they didn't adopt the Quran. All here in America, they were gonna do this, right? What were they gonna do? How are they gonna get here?
Well, and I don't doubt that the rank and file out there, young Arabs, hate us and would love to see us annihilated, but the plan was something else. So what is the plan now with those oligarchy leaders now that Putin is doing what he's doing? What are they going to do next?
Well, I think right now, there probably is, I wouldn't say panic. I think there's probably a lot of rushed meetings going on right now because they have to manage this through a lame duck president named Obama, which right now is not very popular with the American people, and he wasn't supposed to be. He was supposed to cause everything that he's caused and take the blame for everything that's happened for 20 years, and then we'll be stupid enough to elect Jeb Bush to the White House. That's the way it was planned. But this is going to disrupt not just what's going on in the Middle East. That's going to disrupt us here, because the American people, and I'll grant you, I just heard Matt Drudge and Alex Jones talking, and I don't like either one of these characters, okay? They're both narcissists. Both of them have been known to rise out of thin air.
For the record, I'll tell you, I like Alex. He comes on the show a lot. But
okay, well,
you're entitled to your opinion.
I can't go along with that, but that's neither here nor there. But I heard them discussing the fact that the American people are buying all of this because, in Matt Drudge's language, they're ill. Matt Drudge kept using the word sickness and illness. There's something wrong with the American people. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I do know right now, this has gotten past the American people. We're on the brink of, for the first time, a serious breach that could place us at war with an actual nation state. We've been fighting little petty regimes, Vietnam, Afghanistan. These are backward countries. They're running around in sandals in the
well. Also, though, Craig, when you're playing one of those walnut games, right? You got 3 walnuts and you got the little pea under one, and you're moving your hands and you got to guess which one it is. When you got the American people distracted from a bad economy that has gotten a little better, but when you have them worried about personal things like that, they don't look at what's going on the other side. And that's what's been happening.
And let's be honest about it. You're the media guy that's putting this information out. You're not going to hear this on MSNBC, CBS, ABC, or Fox.
No.
You're not going to hear that the Chinese have signed a pact with Russia and have a carrier group off the Syrian coast and are preparing to back Putin. You're not going to hear that Iran is sending ground troops through Turkey into Syria to back the Russian ground troops. If this goes on, Americans are going to die in Syria, and then it'll be up to Obama to take the oligarchy's orders and tell the American people, Americans are dying and we have to do something about it. And you're going to be one of the only shows with it archived that explains for the last year and a half, at least with me on your show,
right,
that this has been orchestrated. You've been lied to. The American people aren't sick. That's not the problem.
And they're not stupid.
And they're not stupid. The American people are being lied to, and the media, by omission, is keeping them ignorant.
Well, let's take some calls with you, Craig, when we come back. Whoa. Craig, at what point did you see that something was very, very wrong about all this?
Oh, that would have to go all the way back to when I was in the military, Vietnam. So
yeah,
that was my first awakening. I was on R&R at Da Nang, and I fell asleep on the beach, got a terrible sunburn. But while I was lying there, getting absolutely as drunk as a skunk, I watched these large Exxon ships and carriers and transport ships carrying IBM equipment, large, huge crates
in a war zone,
across them, all traveling north. If you know your map and geography, and as a military man, I, of course, knew where the north was. At Da Nang, we were at the very tip of North Vietnam. So these boats were all going north. So I bothered myself enough to, before I left Da Nang, I am still on R&R, and sunburned, probably way too drunk, stopped a full-bird colonel and his entourage and asked if I could ask him a question. They were all over me. I thought they were going to kick my butt.
And you were inebriated while you're doing it.
I was inebriated at the same time. But he told everybody to be quiet and stand down. He just looked at me and said, come over here. What's your problem? And I told him what I saw. And I said, I need you to understand this. I told him I was in the 101st Airborne. I was working with Mercs out of Fubai. And we were killing people. I said, now I need to understand this. And he said, all right, I'm going to tell you. And he did. He told me exactly the truth of the matter. It was a horrible thing to face as a 19-year-old soldier fighting for my country.
What did he say? How did he say it?
He said they're going north because we're not really at war with North Vietnam. This war is a joke.
The general said that.
It was a full-bird colonel. But he said the war is a joke. He said, we're not really here to fight the Vietnamese. This is about China. This is about Russia. This is geopolitical. He said, they're our allies. We're supplying them with oil and equipment, and we haven't stopped trading with the North Vietnam ever, and we never will. He said, if we wanted to stop North Vietnam, we'd mine Haiphong Harbor and just bomb them into the Stone Age. It'd be over. He said, we have no intention of doing that. And after I stood there and looked foolish, he said, give me your name rank. I want to know who you are and where you're stationed. He said, what do you want? I said, well, now I want out. I said, I want to become a crew chief with the AH-1G Cobras.
19 years old.
I don't want to fly gunships anymore.
Wow. Gutsy.
So I did. I got transferred. My MOS was automatically changed, and I was kicked upstairs, and my career has been completely different ever since.
I would guess so. What would you...
You know, those are the questions that, in truth, if you have guts enough or are inebriated enough to ask, there are men that will stand tall, answer your question, and look at you and go, you're the only one that's ever asked that question.
I'm amazed he gave you the answer.
And he promoted me. He saw to it that I was promoted, changed my MOS, and I got straight out of combat. Well, not completely, because my entire unit did get wiped out towards the end of my tour. It didn't work out entirely perfect, but let's put it this way. It changed my perspective about what my country is and what my government does versus what our perception is, whether you're in the military or out there as a civilian. For instance, the Russians have not attempted to shoot down any of our U.S. drones, but did you know that they have flown up next to them?
Oh, yeah, I had that story right before you came on. At least 3 episodes already, at least.
3 episodes already. Now, if they wanted to, they could shoot them down. And here's the sad part. They're using their drones to track ISIS members. They've actually got them on YouTube, posted on YouTube, watching ISIS members planting IEDs at Syrian mosques, which they then were intending to blow up and blame it on the Russians.
Oh, my God.
But not only did the Russians film it the entire time, they went in, shut down the IEDs, and killed the ISIS members by putting troops on the ground and killed them. They just killed them and ended it. Now, we could be doing the same thing if we wanted to, but that's never been what our government
that was never the intent.
Been about. We've been lied to.
What would be the right thing for us to do?
The right thing would be for the American people to actually vote for a candidate and back a candidate to overthrow the regime that's running Washington, D.C.
Is that going to ever happen?
Not without bloodshed, and then I think, to be honest with you, I believe we would lose. I think we've already lost too much as a nation, as a people. I don't agree with Matt Drudge saying that, the American people are sick. I think the American people
are numb.
I think we've been lied to, distracted, confused, and you're not being told the truth in the mainstream media. Otherwise, every American watching the news would know that there's Iranian, Chinese, and Russians in Syria, not just Russian jets throwing around cruise missiles off of carriers or destroyers in the Caspian Sea. If the American people knew the entire extent of what's been going on for just the last 2 years.
I think some of these news people, Craig, know it. They've seen it, but they probably say, I can't go and report that on my network. They'll have my head.
The editor wouldn't allow it. And if they tried to go behind the editor would have them fired.
They're fired.
It's a corporate system, no different than Exxon. You don't have a free press in America. George Noory has a free press in America. You have interviews to people that aren't owned, bought, and paid for, like Craig Hewlett. But ABC, CBS, 6 giant corporations control everything the American people, by and large, hear, see, and watch. 6 major giant corporations. It's the first thing on my website when you go to the front page of my website, is that corporate interlock, and that's the reason it's there, to show the American people the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm doing it with George Noory and Carl Nelson and others. The reason I'm doing it is right there, the first thing. 6 giant monopoly corporations that cross directorship with oil companies, Goldman Sachs, pharmaceuticals. Give me a break. Give me a break. You are never going to be told the truth again in America by the media, except what I've just said.
To the phones now we go. They are lining up for you, Craig. Rick is in New York. Hey, Rick, go ahead.
Hey, Craig. Craig, you're right on with everything you said. Case in point, I live in New York here, and I get my news basically from foreign radio stations and also some of the conspiracy radio stations that are on the city here. And the week that Russia went in, on Tuesday they told us the Russians had gone into Syria.
Yeah.
On the Thursday before that, I was listening to one of these conservative talk radio things, and the guy said something just came over the wire. Russia has gone in with arms and men into Syria. This was on Thursday, the week before. So I said to myself, wow, I can't wait to get home. I called my friend who's a doctor, and I said, when you get home, I said, turn on CNN. You're not going to believe it. Russia's gone into Syria now. Things are really warming up. So I go home, and I turn on the TV. Nothing. CNN, MSNBC, nothing. So I turned back on the radio station that I first heard this come on, and the moderator said it wasn't on the news portion. The moderator said it. And I listened to the news for 2 hours. They didn't say a word about it. So my friend calls me back. He said, what are you talking about? You didn't go into Russia. I said, you just wait.
He thought you were nuts.
Exactly. And so I called a station in Canada that I know. One of the guys who works there subs at your thing sometimes on Saturdays and Sundays. But anyway...
Richard.
Right. I called the station, asked to speak to somebody in the newsroom. I'm really good with my mouth, so I got through to somebody. And I told him what I just told you guys, And he said, no. He said, you won't hear about it. I said, why? He said, there's a blackout. He said, ABC, CBS, NBC, there's a news blackout on that story. I said, but it's true, right? He said, yeah, Russia and, he didn't say China at that point. He said, just Russia is in Syria now with weaponry and arms. And then, the weekend went by, and Tuesday they finally told us what happened, like it had just happened. But it hadn't just happened.
And remember, we had it on this show all along.
Right. I think I heard on your show, George, either last week or the week before, wasn't it just Russia was in Syria? There was a Chinese aircraft carrier that was off the coast around Syria.
And that information
nobody's speaking about it. No one spoke about it at all. You're the first person tonight that I've heard say something about it.
And there's Iranian troops on their way to back the Russians on the ground.
Many of them.
So if we've got 150,000 Russian Spetsnaz on the ground, we've got Iranians on the ground backing them, we've got Chinese advisors on the ground coordinating the air campaign with a Chinese aircraft carrier, I think Putin has made it very clear that his blitz in Syria is going to stand.
Let me ask you this, Craig.
Unless he wins.
Geopolitically, why do they want Assad to stay as opposed to go?
They don't care whether he stays or not. Putin doesn't give a damn. Putin is saying enough with America. He's drawing the line against us.
That's what it is.
In fact, his foreign minister yesterday announced in his most recent speech, Putin's foreign minister said, he waved his hand mockingly at the press corps, waved his hand. This is a foreign press corps, didn't get reported, but he said, by the way, your New World Order thing, it's over.
And I got to tell you, in a very strange way, the only candidate to get this is Donald Trump.
Isn't that sad? Because he has no chance of getting the election.
As much as a front runner as he is right now, I think you're right. Something strange is going to happen.
He can't get the delegates. The party decides the delegates. They're already buying the delegates to flip for Jeb Bush.
You still think Jeb, with his minuscule polling, is going to pop up there?
Well, you're polling voters. Voters don't matter. It's the money and the delegates that matter, and the money buys the delegates.
That's going to be interesting.
We don't have an electoral system. We have a system that we have 535 civilian contractors in the House and the Senate, bought and paid for. I think Boehner left because he finally realized this chicken's going to come home to roost.
Leeds, Alabama. Noel's with us. Hey, Noel, go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Nori.
Good morning, Noel.
Good morning, Craig.
Hi.
I really honor you guys. I honestly can say, as a military man of 20 years, there are two people that I can look at in the morning and honestly say, I'd love to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you. The United States, Greg, I got to commend you on bringing forth the information that the American people have been shadowed on so many issues that should have been played a little bit differently. I kind of look at Nori, spent 9 years in the military. I spent 20. You spent the worst part of Vietnam, and my heart goes out to you. It does. It really does, because of the things that you went through. But you did it for a cause at first, what you thought was for the United States of America, because I still fly the flag in that front yard no matter what happens. This land is your land. This land is my land. And the way I see, if they don't come straight with the American people, I believe Craig said it, there is going to be a rush on the government. And we need to take all those people out and reestablish, I feel, a new Congress, a new president, and get this country straight. Now, Trump has got a lot of the voters and the vets that I know around here, because the first thing he said was he was going to straighten this out, where they have mocked and ridiculed the veterans after they got out of the service. They didn't take care of them like they should have. All right. And number two, he said he's going to get this military back up to where it's respected and honored. And when you say the United States of America, it's done with respect again, not laughed at. Now, I want to give you an example. Back I guess it was about the 80s. I was over in Turkey for a year with the military. The commander of the C-130, something happened to him, and he got sick and couldn't fly the aircraft. Well, they volunteered me because I had some air training, so I ended up flying the C-130. Well, about 2 hours of flying the aircraft, all of a sudden a Russian bomber comes up, and I see it coming up, and I was at 28,000 feet, and he brought that aircraft up and tried to tip my wings. Well, I kept trying to avoid it, and I was screaming over the PA there, "Hey, somebody get up here, I got problems."
Wow.
And nobody, it was like, "You need to just keep quiet about this. It might be an international incident." I said, "Well, why is he trying to bump us off, trying to knock me out?" And I'm hanging onto the wheel, basically trying to say, "What's next? What's next? Do we go after him or what?" And they said, "No, back out, drop it down." So I dropped down to 10,000 feet quick. And we got out of the range. Well, they dropped back down, and of course, he gave us, I could see right through the window of that Russian MiG, and he was giving me the all-American hello with his finger. You know how that goes.
He was playing with you.
Playing with me. And they've been playing with us. Think about California when they flew off the coast of California not too long ago, what Craig said.
Yeah.
They flew by and got on the radio and did what they did just to see. And think about up in Alaska what they did up there.
Well, keep in mind, we can do the same thing. And I hope we don't play those games.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. We need to be concrete, and we need to execute our actions firmly and swiftly.
Okay, now, I have to break in here.
Go ahead, Craig.
I love what this guy believes in, what he's talking about, and it would be great if these things, this straighten them out, what we have to do. But, you're saying we as though you and I and the Pentagon and the U.S. military personnel active duty have any say in any of this. I truly believe, and I'm going to say something I know I've never said before, George. I think the oligarchy that runs this country, it's a corporate oligarchy that runs everything inside the Beltway. The votes don't matter. When I say 535 civilian contractors, I mean they're civilian contractors like Blackwater. You're not voting for anybody. These people are bought and paid for, and they take their orders from the corporate structure whose lobbyists sit in their office. I sat and witnessed it working for Jack Metcalf. They sit in that office, and they tell the congressman and the senator how they're going to vote on issues.
You're absolutely right.
You're not going to remain in office.
Well, then here's the other thing. Bev Harris, who writes books on black box voting, is convinced there's going to be more tampering in the next election.
And why wouldn't there be? Because I'm telling you right now, the voters don't matter. We're not living in the America you think. Whatever it is that's in your head that America is or was is over. So, then it follows that I have to be honest. Given that Putin has made the move that I predicted in 1990 he would do, the minute we got into his face, got to his border, started messing with his territory and his national interest, I said that's where the line will draw, and we will be at war with a real army.
What do you
Not
think?
a Vietnamese army or an Afghan army or a beat-up old wreck of an army like the Iraqi army. I'm talking about a Russian military that is our equal in every capacity.
Is this time for China to try to take Taiwan, which is what they've wanted?
Why wouldn't they? If Russia goes to war with America in Syria, what would stop China from taking Japan if they wanted to? The point here is this.
30 seconds before the break.
Oligarchy that is running the United States, do they really care whether America were to win or lose this war?
No, because most of them don't even live here.
They don't. And their interests aren't here. They're global.
That's right. They've got their houses in the Bahamas or God knows where. They're gone. Craig, what would happen to U.S. policy if we simply said, we're just getting out of all these other countries. We're going to take care of our own. And goodbye, we're out. What would happen?
Whoever had the power to say that would probably be assassinated if they thought they could actually pull it off. This is a global regime, and they refer to it as a global regime of economic interdependence. The economic interdependence is between the giant multinational monopoly corporations in America, the West, and between themselves. In other words, General Motors of Bonn, Germany, and General Motors of Detroit. Okay, that's the interdependence. It isn't between Germany and America. Germany and America don't exist. Only the corporate structures exist. That's what TPP, that's what Citizens United, that's what the World Trade Organization is for, is to eliminate the sovereign nation states from being part of this arrangement.
Is it all about money?
This is all about money and power and natural resources. Why do you think the AFRICOM footprint is now the largest military footprint in the world? Is because African continent without Gaddafi is open for market acquisition. That's what AFRICOM is there for.
How much money,
to
Craig?
guarantee those resources.
How much money do they need? How much power do they? Are they so bored with what they have that they have to do this?
No, this is corporate megalomania. This is when I left the military, I went into the corporate world to become a capitalist pig and make as much money as possible and move to Switzerland.
That's what you wanted to do.
That's what I was going to do. That's where I was headed when Kathy DePass met me. That's what I was doing. I was actively pursuing that when she met me. I was referred to euphemistically as the kid in Los Angeles, in the accounts that I had. And I had the largest corporate accounts in the nation in Houston and L.A. When I realized what they were up to, when I went into the boardrooms at that level and began to understand that they were doing exactly the same thing as what the Pentagon was doing. The boardrooms were a war room. The pins on the maps designated areas to be taken over. They were targets to be taken over and eliminated, competitors to be eliminated. I subscribe to a daily app that I get every merger and acquisition in the Western world, mostly the United States. Every single morning, there's over 100 corporations up for mergers and acquisitions.
Oh,
there
it's
is
incredible.
No free enterprise system.
I, as you know, spent a lot of time in St. Louis, and one of the big corporations there was always Anheuser-Busch, which got bought out by a company called InBev, and that company just made an offer to buy Miller for like $100 billion.
There it is.
And
okay.
Miller's
That's
fighting.
Going to take place in every industry that matters.
Unbelievable.
Always use that word. Always understand the language I use. That matter. The politics that matter. There's no difference between the Democrats and the Republicans about the issues that matter. Mergers and acquisitions will eliminate all competition. When I realized that, I liquidated my corporation and began doing this work publicly, full-time, for the last 35 years.
Has this been beneficial?
Completely ineffective.
I was going to say, has this been beneficial to you personally?
Absolutely not. I filed bankruptcy about 10 years ago, got back on my feet, and we're barely making it as we speak. There's no way to make money doing what I'm doing the way I'm doing it.
No.
There's the only way to do it and not be owned. I can't be fired.
Why do you do this?
Because I care about my country and my grandchildren and the future of this country. And if the American people would hear this information well enough over a long enough period of time and communicate it with their friends and family, the American people could change the course of history because we still have the vote. Otherwise, one of these days we're going to wake up and we're not going to have the vote.
But then you'll be on my show going, I told you so. But it'll be too late.
And then you probably won't have a show.
I'll be with you. Let's get maybe in Switzerland.
Look, when the news stories come out simultaneously, on the same paper I'm publishing about what's going on in Syria, Ukraine, North Africa, AFRICOM, I'm publishing articles that say U.S. corporations are hiding $2.1 trillion overseas. On your show, I reported through the Levy Institute, $23 trillion was taken from the Treasury and the Federal Reserve and lent out to corporations and banks throughout the entire world. 23 trillion American dollars.
Gone.
When overseas, it's gone. So I ask you a question. If the same oligarchy that's calling the shots at the Pentagon in the war in Ukraine, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya, throughout the entire world, in other words, everywhere. We're at war everywhere. What do they care if we lose? America loses.
They don't.
What do they care if America, you and I, lose?
Because all they want is the asset.
Because at the end of the day, who will have to borrow money from Goldman Sachs to put Halliburton, Brown, and Root back in business to rebuild Iraq, Syria,
That's right.
Libya?
Exactly. Let's go. Let's finish up with some calls. We'll go to Chris in Tampa. Hey, Chris, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. The whole thing's global, but I don't think it's financial based. I think there's getting rid of country borders. I think it's getting rid of, believers. You can't have a global society unless there's an evolution involved.
It may be all part of the same, Craig, don't you think?
Well, of course it's money. I mean, money is power. Power is money. Kissinger was being euphemistic when he said power was the only aphrodisiac. You use power to get more money. But he did say one correct thing. Absolutely correct. It is about the loss of national sovereignty of every single nation state that matters.
Yes, that's
true. That
true.
means you and I will lose our nation-state sovereignty and our Constitution right along with Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Ukraine, and on it goes. Now, I'm not saying Russia and China have a system better.
Oh,
they don't. They don't have our U.S. Constitution either. So the point here is that if we go to war with these countries, they can actually defeat America as America, but they will not defeat the global regime who will come out winning, even if America here domestically goes completely down the toilet, and we end up looking like a third world developing country.
Now, some would say about China, my gosh, they own us we're swallowed by debt.
They just own our paper. I'm talking about domestically, this country collapsing. It will only affect you and I. It will not affect the Fortune 400, Goldman Sachs, the pharmaceuticals. They will be as rich as ever.
Do they even care about us?
No, that's the point. When Samuel P. Huntington referred to the elite, the very elite I'm discussing, I refer to them as a global oligarchy. He referred to them in one of his last books as gold-collar workers, as a distinction between white-collar and blue-collar. He said these men are gold-collar workers. They have no allegiance to America or Switzerland or any country.
No, they've got, I'm convinced they have their houses put away in some of the greatest areas of this planet. They don't care.
They don't care. So if we go to war with Russia, do they care if we lose the war? No, they don't. I do.
But they want to do business with the winner.
And they'll do business with Russia whether they win or lose.
Let's go to Dawn in Salem, Oregon, west of the Rockies. Dawn, you're on with Craig Hewlett. Go ahead.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Craig, you were saying that, I argue with my neighbors, my significant better 7/8 here, my wife. I tell her, get out and vote. At least do something. But people are so, it's like they don't care or they don't want to be bothered with it. And another thing, I was a crew chief on the CH-46 during the Vietnam War.
Thanks for
sharing. Lucky you.
Gee. Anyway, what do we do, Craig? What do we do? I try to wake them up, and it's like they're apathetic. There's nothing they can do about it. So what's your suggestion?
I don't have a suggestion other than take my information and use it to try to wake people up. If you don't have any success, I have failed.
See, Craig, I think we're going to win. In the long run, I think we're going to win.
Okay, now that's, I love that altruism in you, George. Unfortunately, I'm an old Army guy and a corporate guy. I don't have that enthusiasm. I don't care whether we win or lose. I'm in it for the fight. I'm a Nietzschean. I'm in this for the fight. I'm ready for the fight. I don't care whether we win or lose. And even if we lose, it doesn't mean it's over. It's only over when you're dead.
I could see us in a bar. I'd have to jump in there and help you every time, wouldn't I? Jeez. Let's go to Ed in Philadelphia. Hey, Ed, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Thanks for taking my call, George.
Sure thing.
Mr. Hewlett, I thank you for your service in Vietnam, truly. And I usually agree with almost everything you say.
Thank the ones that died. Don't thank me.
Well, there's a heck of a lot of disinformation about Israel being spewed by rabidly racist, anti-Jewish, anti-Israel.
By who?
Islamic fundamentalist websites.
Oh, I agree.
Obviously.
Sure.
Well, that's obviously clear. But do you know that Putin just left Israel and told Israel to stand down, do not attack the Iranians that are on the ground in Syria, or you will deal with us?
Wow, I didn't know that.
Well, the lies are then parroted by fascist Western white supremacist websites where they get legs over here.
That's true too. No, you're right.
Yeah, but they're always going to exist. There's still Ku Klux Klan. There's feminists that hate white men that are heterosexuals. Well, I'm not sure I understand your point.
Well, I'd like to say Israel sends doctors across the border to Jordan nearly every day. They spend billions of dollars trying to help innocent Syrians who are the victims of the civil war for 3 years now. And one of the lies about them is that they created ISIS. They didn't create ISIS. That was reported on Radio Islam, which is a propaganda arm, fascist propaganda arm of the Iranians.
Hold on a second. You're talking about, you're taking us completely off the subject matter. And when I discussed who created ISIS, we were discussing the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Memorandum that was released by Edward Snowden that demonstrated that U.S. military intelligence and other allied intelligence services created ISIS to use against Assad of Syria because we could no longer go in as the United States government representing the attack on Assad. So we created ISIS, and we even created, in that document it proved, we created the safe zones for them to operate in. Now, the most hideous part of all of this is Putin is going into those safe zones, and he's already killed off probably 40% of the so-called ISIS, Al-Qaeda people, groups, organizations, whatever you want to call it. They're actually called Daesh. I don't want to get into the complicated language of it.
Wait till he gets into Iraq.
He's going to go in and he's going to clean slate, okay? Now, are we going to try to stop him? I don't think so. We're going to get embarrassed on a global scale, and Israel is going to stand down. They're going to huff and puff and bluster, but they're not going to do anything either.
I sure wish the Ayatollah in Iran would stop his rhetoric. Sure would make things a little easier.
It would, because I don't think half of what he says he's even serious about. He's a manipulator of his own people. He's a nation-state leader and a bully. But at the same time, is he going to sit around and wait for U.S. military and Israelis to come in and bomb him into the Stone Age like Iraq, Syria, and Libya?
Unfortunately not. That's why he's building up his own support system.
I'm not supporting one regime or the other. I'm opposing the global regime that actually exists. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy of Jews or bankers or anything else. It is a corporate regime that makes perfect corporate sense globally when you understand that they don't respect the U.S. Constitution. Do you understand? It's unconstitutional to prepare trade agreements negotiated outside of Congress. That in itself is unconstitutional. But has anybody raised that issue other than Jack Metcalf when I worked for him?
We need 100 more like Metcalf.
That's true,
Linda,
but I don't see that happening.
Linda in Quantico, Virginia. Hi, Linda. Go ahead.
Hi, I just would really like to thank you guys for your conversation tonight. I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
One of them is I would like to ask if your guest, and I'm so sorry, I've had his name on my mind all night. Now I'm a little nervous. But I'd like to ask him to expand a little bit about ISIS. If he thinks that ISIS, is he saying that ISIS is completely fake? I mean, is he saying that they're being manipulated? If he can expand about that a little bit.
It's a creature of the intelligence community to go in and be able to, we would use ISIS. In other words, our intelligence community creates ISIS. We use them to go in and attack Assad of Syria. Then we go in and we attack supposedly ISIS for the terrible things ISIS is doing, but in fact we're destroying the infrastructure of Assad. We're destroying his regime using ISIS as the target. But we don't actually kill ISIS. Proof that that's true, Putin is killing ISIS. He's already killed off 40% of them in just 1 week.
Oh, they got to be scrambling, I bet.
ISIS. They are. They're actually in a panic trying to get out.
They can't convoy.
Put ground troops on the ground.
You haven't seen them cheering down the roads recently, have we?
No. In fact, that's why he put 150,000 Spetsnaz troops on the ground who volunteered to go in. That's how much they respect Putin. They went in to cut off their escape routes.
The Soviet Union, when they went into Afghanistan, were faced with the freedom fighters, the Mujahideen that we supported, who became the Taliban.
Yes.
What happened after that? I thought we all got along with them.
Well, no. Afghanistan had to be taken out because of a pipeline issue. Afghanistan, the Taliban, the Mujahideen, that we now call the Taliban, refused to make a deal with the corporate regime I'm talking about, namely Unical, and I published this information in the Hydra of Carnage. That's that information.
That's where Karzai came from, the guy who headed up.
They refused to agree to the pipeline, so the Taliban had to be removed from power. So we pretended bin Laden did 9/11 rather than the Saudis, and that was the excuse to go in and remove the Taliban from power. But it was because the Taliban refused to go along with Unical, Goldman Sachs, and the oil industry and build a pipeline through Afghanistan. And, of course, the deal would be they get hardly nothing for the pipeline usage, but the oil flows through Afghanistan and doesn't stop there. So they said no. So we took them out. And we did that in a coordinated effort with Saudi Arabia.
Jason in Manhattan, he's been on for almost an hour waiting to get through. Jason, go ahead, sir.
Hey, George, can you hear me?
Yeah, we sure can.
Yeah, great show tonight, George. On fire.
It is.
Anyways, yeah. Long-time listener here. 2 questions for you guys, Craig.
Okay.
Let's
go with one. We only got a minute left. Go ahead.
Okay. What does he think about Ebola as like a depopulation? And is it weaponized? You know, because you talk about Africa and how that ties into maybe like predictive programming and movies that we see.
All right. Ebola. What do you think about that?
It was not weaponized, no. And in fact, the last patient, my understanding is from our research, the last patient that has left, what's the country, what was the country that got hit the hardest?
Liberia.
Liberia. The last patient just left, completely cured. AFRICOM is opening up facilities in 20 different African nations simultaneously to see that it never happens again. Now, are they capable of doing something like that? I don't know. You know, I published a report called The Final Solution 25 years ago, and it was signed off on by Henry Kissinger, NSM 200. Go look it up on the internet. Right. You'll see just how cynical the men I'm talking about have become and always were.
You take care of yourself. I worry about you, Mr. Hewlett. Be careful. All right?
Don't worry. Thank you, George.
Craig Hewlett.